Welcome to AP European History with Dr. Brovkin. Today we begin to discuss Mussolini's Italy, or fascism in Italy, or basically the history of Italy in between the two world wars, as we have done a little bit with the situation in Germany, in France, in Britain, and in Stalin's Russia. Now, when we begin to speak of Italy, under Mussolini, a very complex question arises because even today there are very different views about Mussolini. Some in Italy today remember him in a very positive light. Nobody, or practically nobody, except the French in Germany, remembers Hitler in a positive light. So, fascism also is a very difficult topic to discuss because it has begun to mean something totally different. In today's political vocabulary, fascism is something very negative, almost identical with National Socialism or Nazis in Germany. Whereas, in fact, in Italy in 1920s and 30s, fascists and fascism did not mean anything close to what it means today. It was a very different system and very different also from the Nazis in Germany. So what we have to try to understand is what it actually meant and what it actually was, as it was then and as it was seen by the contemporaries. Now, nobody would dispute the fact that fascism is a social movement. If you recall, I was saying that Stalinism is not a social movement, it's a construction from above. It's a revolution from above. Fascism is a movement that nobody can deny. Mussolini did lead a certain part of Italian society, and it was a movement. It was an ideology. It wasn't immediate, but it did crystallize into a set of ideas and values that one could definitely sense is Mussolini's stamp on it, that could be called Italian fascism. What was it? We will see as we go along, but most importantly, I think the key element in Italian fascism is a very strong nationalism. Italia, patria, I mean, these are words that are constant in almost all speeches of Mussolini. Or to put it in a more contemporary terms, Mussolini wanted to make Italy great again. That is the dream of the past, the dream of Roman Empire, the dream of having Mediterranean and Italian lake. These would be the kind of a positive ideals of great Italy. It also is fear of the communists, the socialists. Why would they fear the communists, even though they themselves were socialists? That's very confusing to some people. Very simple. Because communists at that time are internationalists, or they are friends of the Soviet Union, or they believe in international solidarity of workers against against the bourgeoisie. They're all local national capitalists. Well, that's pretty much what this is all about. Fascists are against communists because communists, from their point of view, betray Italy's national interest in favor of Moscow, in favor of international solidarity of workers. And their whole idea is unity of the nation, all Italians, unity of all Italians as a basis of a national resurgence. So this is why they would be against the communists. Now, let's just briefly watch or follow the evolution of Mussolini, as he definitely was an interesting case, as he was a socialist, and he was a socialist for many years. He belonged to the Socialist Party, and that is particularly interesting how from a socialist he turned into what he called fascism and what he meant by that. Now, Mussolini was born in a very humble background. His father was a blacksmith. He studied Das Kapital, Karl Marx. He studied Nietzsche. He was, a very humble origin. And from the very beginning, he was, introduced into the socialist circles and very quickly made a career in the Socialist Party. So by 1912, he was already a member of editorial board and then becomes the chief editor of the key, most important socialist newspaper in Italy, Avanti. So if we look at Mussolini by 1914, he is one of the key leaders of the Socialist Party of Italy, which obviously had the same values as all other socialist parties, which was workers' rights and benefits and trade unions and solidarity and all kinds of other things. So what happens in 1914 is, of course, a transforming experience. With 1914, there is a kind of an upsurge of nationalism all over Europe, and it split many political parties and many socialist parties as well into those that were internationalists, and they will become later on communists by 1921, and those that are nationalists who actually defend their own nation first and above others. And so the conservative social democrats in Germany, such as Noske, cooperated, as you recall, with Freikorps, who crushed the communists at that time called Spartakists in Germany in 1918. Very similar situation in Italy. The nationalist branch of the Socialist Party splits apart, led by Mussolini, and they form their own party that is called the Nationalist Party. The idea is basically very simple. Italy is above everything else, and we cannot go together with the socialists who will become communists, who are internationalists. So Mussolini's transition is Italy should be treated as an equal partner among the victorious powers, and from the point of view of nationalists, it was not. It was definitely not equal to Britain and France. Did not get enough, at least from their point of view, even though it got a piece of Austria. So their grudge was that Italy should be treated as a great power, and it was not. Also, what is happening in Italy is very important. The political situation in Italy in 1919, very similar indeed to what was going on in Germany and in Britain and in France, which means hundreds of thousands of people come back from the front, angry veterans, unemployment, collapse of industry, inflation, strikes, instability, all of these features in all of these countries, but in Italy, they are somewhat worse. And they are worse because Italy is less industrialized than Germany or Britain. And in Italy, you have a huge gap between the south and the north. And in the north, you have a different constellation of political power. In the north, you have big industrialists, you have industry, you have north of Italy, from Rome, you have the king, you have the church, you have the big industrialists, and you have very, very left-wing kind of revolutionary trade unions. And what you do have in Italy and you do not have in Germany is the anarchists. And the anarchists' base is in the south. And this is like a landless proletariat, the workers in the fields who are particularly prone to anarchism and also terrorism. I mean, some of them are known to have had experience with terrorist groups and attacks. So all of that makes Italy particularly vulnerable and particularly unstable. And it is in this situation that dramatic events would occur. So the political system in Italy is very much like in France. It's a republic which always has new governments and new cabinets. It's a parliamentary republic, and you have the same constellation of forces. You have liberals, socialists, and the Catholics. All of them are more or less conservative and a little bit leftist. In other words, they do value republic, but they're increasingly scared as the middle classes or upper classes. There's profound fear. Fear of what? Well, fear of communists, fear of Bolshevism, fear of instability, fear to lose their pensions, fear to lose their jobs, fear of inflation that would wipe out their earnings. This is a very, very dramatic time for most of European countries when all these fears crystallized in some kind of a reaction. Which took different forms. In Britain, there was a Labour Party that came to power. In Germany, it was the Kapp Putsch, and then stabilization. In Italy, the play out was different in that instability ended up with Mussolini's victory. But before we do that, what exactly happened? Mussolini organizes his new political party, which is nationalist, and it begins a kind of a popular movement of unhappy elements, war veterans like in Germany, and artisans and the middle classes and some workers who basically feel that they are unhappy and they want to take things into their own hands. And so he organizes this movement, asks his people, his followers to put in black shirts, probably, kind of mimicking Carbonari or mimicking the Garibaldi's red shirts some 70 years earlier. In any case, they put on the black shirts and they start harassing communists and those that they blame for instability. In fact, they are the most important source of instability. They win parliamentary support. They do have, ruling elites beginning to support them. And this needs to be explained. Why do the ruling elites begin to support these black shirts, that hooligan elements that only sow instability and contribute to instability? The answer is very simple. Mussolini and his black shirts are nationalists, which means they are against communists, which means they are the ally because they are against the same people you don't like, which is the communists. So they begin to support them because they are a real social force that can stop the communist offensive from the point of view of the ruling elites. And they begin to support them, give them money, promotion, and so forth. And so by 1921, Mussolini is elected member of parliament, and he does have a small faction in the parliament. They also begin to organize all kinds of brigades and local elections, and they seize power here and there. In other words, Italy is sort of fast approaching a crisis as to what to do and how to integrate or not to integrate this growing movement into Italian politics. They call themselves fasci. Fasci is a bundle of sticks that are forming a source of a flame, and this is a movement. I mean, a kind of a picture Mussolini took from ancient Rome. Ancient Rome was, a time when Italy was great, and this is an inspiration for Hitler. So he took that bundle of burning fire as a kind of a symbol of fascism to reignite fire in Italians and to bring Italy to greatness. So it's inspiration in the past. That's what fascism is, and it's virulent anti-communism and nationalism. So this fascist party is a nationalist party against the communists. That's all it is. No more and no more than that in 1920-22. So at one of these critical moments, Mussolini decides to go on a gamble. And that gamble is called March on Rome. He calls on his supporters to just basically organize a march. Nothing particularly spectacular. I mean, after all, we know in history there was marches in Washington and it didn't lead to any revolution. It was a kind of a show of force to the ruling elites that they are a power to be reckoned with. It's a kind of a PR action to promote their significance in Italian politics. That's what it was. In fact, Mussolini himself was sort of in semi-hiding. He was afraid he might be arrested. And the prime minister did in fact urge the king to crush them, arrest them, and restore order. But the king, Victor Emmanuel II, he was of a different opinion. He basically came to a conclusion, and maybe it was a right conclusion, that appointing Mussolini as prime minister would calm things down and would bring the Italy back from the brink of a civil war. Now, these ideas sound strange. How could he have, appoint a fascist? But in the context of the time, it was really not such a bad move from the point of view of keeping peace in Italy. Because we know what happened in Spain in a similar situation. It slided into a civil war in the same kind of situation. The conservative forces, the church, the generals, the army, the landowners, the elites against the working classes and the poor peasants. Spain wound up in a civil war, but Italy didn't. And from that point of view, a rationale without justifying it, of the king is clear. He wants to appoint Mussolini, preempting a possibility of sliding war into chaos. And that was achieved. Mussolini comes in a black frock to be congratulated that he now is the prime minister. And this begins a new chapter in the history of Italy and in the history of what will turn out to be fascism as a movement under Italy, under Mussolini, that we shall consider in the next video. Thank you, and don't forget to subscribe to AP European History with Dr. Brovkin.